Hello, we are live. It is 7 p.m. It is Tuesday night on April the 11th, and this is my first episode that I'm doing of talking with Tracey. And so I believe I've set everything up the best I can, but we will see. Tonight is, I guess, a little bit of a test just to see how this goes. But we have I have a whole evening and talk planned for the next hour for you guys. So I'm going to start by doing an introduction of myself, and then I'm going to launch right into my first topic, which is about coping with fear. So that's kind of where this is going tonight. Hi, Susan. Nice to see you. So I see people are logging on already, so that's awesome. I've been trying to promote this through our website and our emails and all that stuff. So I'm going to start with, I guess, I'll start with an introduction on me and who I am and whatever and why I'm doing this. So that's where I'm going to start with this. And then we're going to talk about fear and coping tools and how to deal with fear in some healthy ways. So I'm Tracey Rogers. I'm the owner of White Feather Holistic Arts. My history is I'm a person in long-term recovery. So I'm 12 years clean and sober. For when I say recovery, a lot of us are recovering from all sorts of different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be from drugs and alcohol. Some of us are recovering from unhealthy relationships. We're recovering from childhood trauma. We're recovering from not liking ourselves. My root core issue was always that I did not like myself. I had a self-hatred that lasted most of my life, really, in the big picture. Self-loathing. So that's, and addiction was a symptom of that. It's not that the self-hatred was a symptom of the addiction. It's the other way around. The not liking myself was at the core of everything. And drugs and alcohol really enforced my belief that I didn't deserve a good life. Made sure that that never happened. So I do identify as a person in long-term recovery, but like I said, not just recovery from drugs and alcohol, although that is part of my story. It's a big part of my story. Along with that, along with the addiction and years of addiction and everything, I had trauma in my childhood. I'm not going to go into details on that right now. We can talk about it later. I'm sure at times it will come up in conversation, but I've got childhood trauma that's there, which started with, and then addiction came in to kind of help cope with that, and the self-loathing and everything came in with that. I experienced depression, anxiety, PTSD for years. Like for more than a decade, I experienced long-term chronic and clinical depression, ended up on medication and stuff for it, and had high anxiety and ended up with very severe PTSD, had a massive breakdown in 2005 and 2006, ended up hospitalized for like 5 weeks with that, and the effects of that lasted, I don't know, 4 years. The effects of that lasted a long time, with high paranoia, and the PTSD and all of that stuff just got worse during that time period. That's when I had an awakening, was, during after the breakdown, I had an awakening. And it's right around the time that I ended up homeless. So I ended up homeless in Toronto, had some life-changing events, ended up down in Arizona. Long story, I'm not going to go into all the details of that stuff. First of all, it's in my book, and you're welcome to read the book. Second of all, I'm sure that stories about that will come up in more details. But anyways, so that's kind of what I had to deal with. And so when I started on my healing journey, I needed tools to help to overcome that stuff. Like I'm not on any medication at all. No drugs, no alcohol, no medication prescribed or otherwise, at all. And I don't experience the PTSD anymore. And I don't experience the anxiety anymore. I don't experience the depression anymore. So I have found tools, and I'm confident that other people are finding tools, and that there's lots of tools. And I know that what works for me isn't necessarily what works for everyone, but there's a number of different things that we can do for all of our different things that are going on in our lives. So that's what I'm here sharing, is all that kind of stuff. So from homeless to eventually, like within 6 years of being homeless, I opened up White Feather. So for anyone who's out there ever watching my stuff, if you're feeling like, God, I'm starting from square one and I don't have time to fix my life. Yeah, you do. You do have time. If you're still alive, you have time to get things straightened out. My life was an absolute train wreck. And I went in 6 years from complete train wreck to having my business. That doesn't mean that everything was fixed within that time period, but it was fixed enough to have my own business and for it to still be around 10 years later. So I really feel that my life is a testimony to the fact that great change is possible if we put the work in on ourselves, because it wasn't about what other people did for me. I mean, people helped me and lots of good things happened, but ultimately I had to put work in on myself. And so I listened to other people when other people gave me tools and things that I could do to help myself on my journey. From there, I had my business open for a number of years. Some cool things happened in those first 6-7 years, and then I went on the Women Riders World Relay in 2019. That was a motorcycle event, all women, largest motorcycle relay in history, and I was part of it. It was a 12-day adventure for me, and that became the frame for my book, which had been a dream for years. The book got published in 2021, and this I'm doing right now. So the business has been there the whole time. The business is still there. My life is good. And so that's a little bit of history about me. And so what I'm wanting to share, and why I'm wanting to share doing these videos and stuff with people is I get to talk to a lot of clients through my business, with Reiki clients and with tarot clients, and just people wandering in off the street and coming into the store. I also speak to women in recovery every week. I go in and do discussions and facilitate some stuff and whatever. And my experience has been that people hear some things that they need to hear. And I wanted to be able to share that on a little bit of a larger scale. So these videos will be recorded and kept so that people can watch them. And if anyone finds something useful in them, great. If you don't find anything useful, I'm sorry. And you can take what resonates and leave the rest. But hopefully some of what we talk about will be things that make you say, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. Because that's what I hear a lot from my clients, and that's what I hear from the women when I'm doing the talks and when I'm doing the facilitating and things like that, the little workshops and stuff, is people hear something that just makes them say, oh, I get it now, and they understand something differently. So I'm hoping that that's what we'll be doing together as a group, is sharing some tools that helps everybody. My goal is to help empower women. And ultimately, the way to empowerment, the road to empowerment, is through personal work. It's personal ownership, taking ownership of our lives, and then ownership of our healing journey, and ownership of healing our triggers, and ownership of all of that stuff, getting to the root of our trauma so that hopefully our trauma is no longer running our life for us. For me, my trauma ran my life for years. For a few decades, my trauma ran my life, meaning that those traumas and the triggers of them and the emotional scars were making all of my decisions for me, and most of them weren't good. A lot of them were self-sabotaging decisions and stuff. So early on in my healing journey, for me, the biggest thing was learning how to like myself, because if I didn't like myself, there was no reason to heal. There was no reason to get better. There was no reason to strive for something other than being depressed and miserable and anxious and experiencing PTSD and all that, because that would just reinforce my belief that I didn't deserve a good life. So that change on wanting to learn how to like me was a massive part. And so that will be an underlying theme in all of these talks that I do, is self-love is really at the core of it. Because, even if we don't have the solution to all of the things going on in our lives, if we can get to that spot where we love the one who's experiencing what we're experiencing, that in itself is a tool to help to cope with whatever's going on. Like any situation, if we can love the one who's experiencing that, meaning ourselves, that in itself is a tool. So that will be an underlying theme in all of the talks that I do, is this whole idea of self-love, because self-love has been a key for me. And I feel that it's a key for a lot of people on the healing journey. The closer that they get to liking themselves, the more work they put into themselves, the more work they put into having healthy relationships, and learning different tools and coping mechanisms and all of that stuff, and learning how to just, go forward into a new direction in their lives. So that's kind of the goal with talking with Tracey. And so I chose today's topic, the topic of coping with fear, because this broadcast, me doing this in the first place, was me walking through some fears. So I thought, well, why not do coping with fears as my very first topic? Because that seems to be an underlying theme for this whole week for me, actually, was walking through some serious fears of mine, and bringing them bringing them to the forefront, and walking through them. This is how I feel about fear. My experience with fear has been this. The universe is a little, I'm not going to use the word cruel. It's interesting what the universe has done. It's like it creates these fears through our experiences in our life, and then it puts our joy and our greatest happiness right on the other side of walking through those fears. That has been my experience. So when I say my greatest fears, probably my greatest fears were self-confidence. Am I good enough? Will people like me? And can I be successful? Will I fail? All that kind of stuff. Those were my greatest fears, honestly. All had to do with self-confidence. And on the other side of that is my greatest happiness. But like one of my greatest fears, I had a massive phobia. It was a PTSD level phobia of motorcycles. Don't ask, it has to do with my past. It was not a healthy phobia at all. And the person that I fell in love with rode a motorcycle. And so part of my greatest happiness was getting to the other side of that. And I didn't even realize how much so. It wasn't just about loving him. It was about riding a motorcycle, because riding the motorcycle was what inspired the book. And that was literally my lifelong dream, was to write a book. So it wasn't just about the motorcycle, wasn't just about this one thing. It was about a number of things in my life, actually, that it would move forward if I got over that fear. Just going to bring something up here. This is a little diagram I made today. So that's us down at the bottom there. This is really hard to do. All right, there we go. That's us down at the bottom. I drew that picture. Isn't she lovely? So that's us. And then this is the fence in the middle. And those are all of our greatest fears. I put a snake and a spider on there just because those are common fears. And then where the magic happens is on the other side of the greatest fears. And I really feel that this is true. That if we will walk through our greatest fears, that we will find amazing happiness on the other side. Our happiness usually does not coincide with us following our fear and sitting in the fear. It sits on the other side of that, and then we realize that our fears were false anyways. False evidence appearing real is a slogan I've heard for fear many times, and it really is that. It's false. My worst fears about me not being any good, and I wouldn't be successful, and no one would want to come see me, and no one would want my artwork that I created, and no one would want a Reiki session with me, all that kind of stuff. All of it was false, but those were very real. They seemed very real, and all of it was incorrect. So I like to help, when working with my clients and working with women, I like to help women to work with going through their fears. And there's a number of different things involved with that. First of all, some self-compassion is always necessary when working with fears. So putting our hands over our heart and loving the one who's feeling fearful, showing compassion for her, not judging her, not putting her down, not saying, oh, why are you so fearful? Nope. I love the one who's feeling fearful. And when I can get calm with my fear, then what I like to do is I like to actually name my fear. Like, what is it exactly that I'm afraid of? So as an example, when I was opening my business, White Feather, I was terrified. I was terrified because I had to sign like a 3-year lease for the building. I had to make all these financial commitments. It was a huge financial commitment to do it. And so I've got these financial fears, which were massive for me. I was inbred by my parents with financial fear, especially from my mom. So I had all this financial fear from childhood that was all there. And then fear that I wasn't good enough, and all the confidence fear and all that stuff. And I remember, I remember just saying to myself, okay, let's just name the fear. Like, what is it? What's my worst case scenario here? The actual worst case scenario, that the business was unsuccessful. That's the worst case scenario. So in the worst case scenario, I'd be going back to work at the job that I already wanted to leave and I wasn't happy in. So that's where I already was. I was already working at the job that I didn't want to be in and I didn't want to do anymore. So my best case scenario was that it was successful and all my dreams came true. Worst case scenario, I'm exactly where I already am. Best case scenario, my dreams come true. It really doesn't seem like much of an argument there whatsoever when you actually name what it is. The absolute worst case scenario. Now, what happens is we catastrophize and we're like, well, if the business isn't successful, then I'm not going to be able to pay my bills and I'm going to go bankrupt and then I'm going to be homeless and oh my God, I just want to kill myself. This is catastrophizing. Here we go. Here's Anxiety Girl. I found this today and I thought this was hilarious, and I can so relate to Anxiety Girl. Able to jump to the worst conclusion in a single bound. Oh God, these tights are too tight. I think I'm going to die. That is the worst case scenario, and she has jumped to it immediately. There's a lot of steps in between there that we're skipping when we do that. This is if A then B, if B then C, and in each of these cases, we're going with the worst case scenario. So if A then B, so if the business is unsuccessful, then I won't have any money. If I don't have any money, then I'm going to lose my apartment. And if I lose my apartment, I'm going to be homeless. And if I end up homeless, I'll be doing drugs again. And then if I'm doing drugs again, I'm going to die. Statistically, this is a highly unlikely outcome because I've taken the worst case scenario for every one of those steps. The actual next step is I could be unsuccessful with the business. That's what the next step is. The next step is not to jump to this place where I'm dead when I'm homeless and all that. But that's where we seem to want to go to, is to the absolute worst case scenario of a whole bunch of things. So what's the next step? Instead of jumping to 10 steps ahead, which is me being homeless, the one step ahead is that my business will be unsuccessful. And the reality of that situation is that I'll end up working at a job I don't like again. That's the worst case scenario. Not 10 steps from now, the worst case scenario. I had a client / friend just a couple weeks ago come to me. They were really upset because their boss had said that they were really angry about something. They didn't say they were angry with them, but the boss said they were really angry about something, almost too angry to talk, and they needed to talk to them, and they'd be talking to them soon. They were so petrified that they were going to lose their job, and that, and so I said, well, why don't you name your fear? What is your worst? Because they were so afraid of this. And I said, what is it that you're afraid of? And she said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, what's the worst case scenario? And she goes, well, that I'm going to end up homeless. And I'm like, that is a big leap from someone telling you that they're angry and want to have a conversation with you. The next step is actually, the worst case scenario would be that, yes, indeed, they're angry with you and you'll have to have a difficult conversation with them. If that happens, then the next worst case scenario could be that you lose your job. The reality is you've lost your job many times before and you've gotten new jobs, and you go out and you get a new job. So that's really kind of the worst case scenario, is that you're looking for a new job. But we take that leap to, then I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage and I'm going to lose my house and I'm going to be homeless. That's a big leap from my boss is angry with me and wants to have a conversation with me. So becoming aware of not catastrophizing is a huge part of coping with fear. And how I recommend that people do that is just like the step that I mentioned here, which is naming the fear, naming the worst case scenario. And if you get to a really a ridiculous one, like I'm homeless, I want you to ask yourself, how many steps are there between my boss being angry with me and me being homeless? And what's the reality of all those things happening, okay? Because if we can look at this with a little bit more logic and be gentle with ourselves, like I love the one who's catastrophizing here. The reality is people in recovery are the kings and queens of catastrophizing. Like get a flat tire. Oh my God, I can't afford $200 right now. Then I'm not going to be able to pay my rent. Then I'm going to, not be able to pay the mortgage. I'm going to lose my house, and then I'm going to be homeless. Oh my God, I just want to kill myself. That was literally how the negative spin used to happen for me when I was dealing with anxiety and depression. It would go from something simple like getting a flat tire to I literally want to kill myself. That was where my thoughts would go. It wouldn't happen immediately in a 30-second span, but within 24 hours, that's the step I'd be at, because I don't have $300 for a flat tire right now. Stop, breathe, ask myself how many steps there are between me and my flat tire and that happening. This is an excellent, excellent coping tool for dealing with fear, because 99 times out of 100, the step we're jumping to is not the next step. We are catastrophizing about something. So getting logical at some point helps. What can help with learning how to do this and get ahead of our thoughts, honestly, is meditation. If we meditate like 5 or 10 minutes a day, that 5 or 10 minutes a day, what happens? See, people are like, oh, I don't know, I can't meditate, I always start thinking. Let's say I'm meditating, I'm trying not to think. And then I realize that I'm thinking. I've been thinking for 5 minutes, but I stop again. I'm going to go back to not thinking. And then I realize I'm thinking again. I'm going to go back to not thinking. That's successful meditation. It does not matter how long it takes you to become aware of the fact that you're thinking. The fact is that you became aware of the fact that you're thinking. So that's what we're going for, because what happens is if we practice that on a regular basis, trying not to think, we will become aware during our waking day when we're just going about thinking about our daily, that all of a sudden we become aware of, oh, I'm catastrophizing in my thoughts right now. I'm worried about this conversation with my boss, and I am jumping to the conclusion that I'm going to be homeless. As it turns out, this person's not homeless. They didn't lose their job. Their boss wasn't mad with them. Their boss was mad with someone else and just needed to have a conversation with someone about it. They actually went to their employee for some help and as a sounding board. But they jumped to the worst case scenario, which wasn't the case whatsoever. Now, there are times when it is going to be the worst case scenario, which is losing your job. It's not being homeless. The worst case scenario is losing the job. The reality is, for me, I've gotten many jobs in my lifetime, and I've always managed to get myself another job. If I really, really want a job, I've always been able to find a job. And right now is a great, if you really want a job, there are jobs out there to find. So that is the worst case. We cause ourselves to suffer if we sit in the energy of the worst case scenario all the time. When I'm going to take, you know what? Death is like the absolute worst. When people talk about the worst case scenario, death is the worst case scenario, that people are afraid of dying or afraid of a loved one dying. So, even talking about that one, there's stuff and tools and whatever that we can work with, even with that one. Let's say we are afraid of death. Myself, I use tools for that because I could sit and suffer forever about being afraid of dying. The reality is, when I get into the logic of it, I have spiritual beliefs that actually assist me with that. Ask yourself what you believe in. Do you believe in God? Yes or no? Do you believe in something out there? Do you believe in a higher energy? Do you believe in a soul? If you believe in a soul, then it means you believe that you're not this body, that you're actually within this body, that your spirit is housed in this body, but it's not this body. So when the body dies, the soul is still there. So you don't die, the body dies, and the body isn't you. If you're atheist, when you die, absolutely nothing happens. Literally, it goes black and it's like you never lived at all. So it's not going to matter whether you lived for 100 years or for 2 seconds. You'll have no memory of any of it if you are incorrect, if you are indeed correct with your atheist thoughts, that there's nothing afterwards. So either you believe in something afterwards or you don't. I guess the worst one that I can think of is if someone's really afraid that they're going to go to hell forever. I myself believe that God is love, so I don't believe that God's going to do that to me for eternity, because that doesn't coincide with God being love. So that's not really a concern of mine. If you're really afraid you're going to hell, I think you want to check your moral compass and then reevaluate your choices you're making in your life. If that's something that you genuinely fear, I'm ready to stand before my God and tell him everything that happened, because I know they know everything that happened anyways. That's kind of where I'm at with that one myself. So this one involves like some logic, like what are my spiritual beliefs? If I do believe in life after death of some sort, whether it's reincarnation or going to heaven or being with my loved ones or returning to the earth and being part of that energy, there's not anything that's really that scary. What people get scared of when we talk about this is they don't want to suffer before they die, or they don't want a loved one to suffer. Well, I'll tell you what causes suffering. Worrying is one of the causes of suffering. Sitting there and worrying about death, you're causing yourself to suffer right there. So just the fact you have just stated that you don't want to suffer, or you don't want someone else to suffer, but you're choosing to suffer in that decision to sit and worry. Your worry isn't going to change the outcome. Your worry isn't going to change the situation. It's not going to change anything about it. So if you're alive, enjoy being alive right now. It comes down to some logic again, and sometimes we have to sit and breathe and get in with our logical mind. Our logical mind can help us at times. I have spiritual beliefs that really, I'm genuinely, personally not afraid of dying. There's part of me that's looking forward to seeing what happens after this, quite honestly. I'm curious. I want to see who's right. I want to know who's right. I'm curious to see if I reincarnate, which is what I kind of believe in. And I want to see if I'm capable of reincarnating somewhere else besides Earth. So for me, it's kind of a little bit of an adventure. So that's like one of our worst places that we can jump to, is the whole death scenario there. Yeah. when I opened the business, so let's say I finally, Susan says, me too. Yeah, us, probably all of us. Probably all of us. I think we all go through this stuff, Susan. Um, so once I got through the fear that I was going to open the business, so I opened the business and I was getting ready to open the doors. I had a week left before the doors opened, and the city of Windsor knocked on the door and they came into my business and they said to me, they said, just letting you know that Ottawa Street's going to be closed for about 8 months this year while we're reconstructing the street. And I burst into tears, and it took me about 5 minutes. And I just, like, after she left, and I just said, all right, let's name this. And this is an example of naming the fear and taking a look. Like, I was like, all right, what is it I'm afraid of here? And I'm like, well, I'm afraid this isn't that I'm going to fail then if the street is closed. And it's like, but my intuition told me to do this, and I trusted my intuition. I'm like, no, my intuition told me to do this. And then my logical mind is like, yeah, but your street's going to be closed. It's probably not going to be successful. Then I had to remind myself that in my intuition told me over and over again to open the business. My intuition never told me why. It never said, you're going to open the business because you're going to be successful. It's going to change your life in that way. My intuition just said, open the business. This is what you're supposed to do right now. For all I knew, I was supposed to open the business because someone was going to walk through it in the first couple weeks that I was open and change my life and take me off in a completely different direction. Maybe I'd meet the person I'd fall in love with. Maybe I'd meet the person who had the next idea for where I was going with my life or the idea for the book or whatever. I had no idea what could open, but what I was doing was I was about to open the doors of a business. I had no idea in reality why my intuition had told me to open the doors. It just told me to open the doors. And so I calmed myself down with that. It's like, nope, I trust my intuition. My intuition told me to do this. So there's something I'm going to learn or experience from this that I need to learn or experience. And I let go of needing to control the outcome. We want to control the outcome of everything. We want to control the outcome of when our loved ones pass away. We want to control the outcome of being sick or not. We want to control the outcome of what's going on in the world with politics and everything. We want to control the outcome. The reality is we can't. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. What does that mean? What I cannot change is everything except me. Anything outside of myself, other people, events, the world, the news, I can't change any of that. So God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, me, how I respond to things. So when that lady comes into the store and says, Ottawa Street's going to be closed, still sitting there and trusting that everything's going to be okay. I will choose to control how I respond to this situation, and instead of freaking out, I'm just going to keep moving forward as I was. And the wisdom to know the difference, meaning recognizing what I have control of and what I don't have control of. And that helped greatly, like with that particular situation. As it turns out, you know what happened with those 8 months? Those 8 months gave me 8 months to get the store ready for a true opening, because I had no idea what I was doing when I opened the store. It was a big empty space with my artwork on the walls and some of my art on my t-shirts and greeting cards. I was doing tarot at the back and Reiki at the back, and it was a big old empty space otherwise. If everyone had come into my store off Ottawa Street right at the beginning, they would have come in and said, there's nothing here, and they never would have come back. Instead, the universe gave me 8 months to get my crap together and have the store looking. By the time that 8 months came around, the store looked good by the time people were coming in. So the universe did it for me, not to me. I love that prayer, says Pamela. Yeah, it's honestly, the serenity prayer is not just for anyone in addiction. It's for everyone. Like the serenity prayer is for everyone, because the reality is I cannot control anything on this planet except how I respond to this planet. That's it. I can choose how I respond. And I choose not to sit in the energy of worrying and stuff, because worrying and jumping to the worst conclusion, that energy of fear, that's suffering. That's literally causing suffering for myself. I pray every day for peace, and I pray for world peace. Well, it starts with me. And the only way I come to peace is by choosing how I respond to things. And that's what I'm learning to do. So these tools I'm giving you tonight, like about learning how to name your fear, what's the worst case scenario? And I'm not talking about 10 scenarios from now. I'm talking about the next case scenario. So if your boss is mad and wants to have a conversation with you, instead of jumping to the conclusion of being homeless, jump to the conclusion of the worst case scenario is that they are angry at me and I could lose my job. That's the worst case scenario. You've survived that. Not only have you survived losing a job before, you've survived way worse than a job. You have a 100% success rate of surviving absolutely everything the universe has thrown at you. That success rate is not changing anytime soon. You have a 100% success rate. Remember that when you're thinking about, oh, I'm going to lose my job. How am I going to survive this? I don't know. The same way that you survived every other crappy thing that happened in your life up until now. You got through it. You soldiered up and you got through it. So, yeah. All right. I'm gonna bring you to a couple other fears because I'm gonna talk about phobias and stuff here for a second. So, I did something this past week. I got my very first tattoo. I've never had a tattoo before, and there's a few reasons why. First of all, I wasn't sure. Like, anytime I thought of something, I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm going to think this is cool in 20 years. So there was always kind of that with it, but there was also, I had a lifelong fear of needles. Which was probably a healthy phobia for me when I was still doing drugs and alcohol, because I never used any needles, and that could have been the end of me. So it was a healthy phobia, and one which I kind of overcome, but not exactly. Like when I go to the doctors and have to get blood taken, I still have to look away and I clench my fist and they tell me to, relax a little bit and whatever, and they remind me to breathe, but I can do it. So that's one of my phobias. Another one of my phobias, when I was terrified in my life, like when I had my breakdown and ran away from my life with nothing but the shirt on my back, I was grateful that I didn't have tattoos at that time, because I remember like wanting to hide myself. And that's why I went to California. I wanted to hide myself. I didn't want anyone to recognize me. And I felt like a tattoo was a real easy way to recognize someone. And I remember being grateful at the time. And so I always had this fear of permanently marking my body in case I ever had to disappear. So it was part of my PTSD. That was literally part of my PTSD from my breakdown, was this fear of permanently marking me because people would be able to find me. And it's PTSD works in funny, it triggers very easily and it triggers in strange ways. So even when I made the decision to get this tattoo, I had to walk through that fear. I had to name the fear, look at it, see whether it was rational or not, and then move through it. I decided I want a tattoo after I walked the Camino last year. The Camino changed my life. It was the most incredible experience of my entire life, an 800-kilometer walk in Spain. And I wanted a commemorative tattoo because I never wanted to forget what my takeaway was. And my takeaway from it was to keep going. Like that's the Camino, you just keep going. It doesn't matter whether you walk 5 kilometers today or whether you walk 500 kilometers today. Just keep going and walk today, and life is like that. In life, sometimes things are hard, but you keep going, and it might be slow that you're moving forward. So I wanted something like that. I wore turtle earrings. I had these turtle earrings. I'm not wearing them right now, but I was wearing turtle earrings for the entire Camino. They were the only pair I took with me to Spain for a reason, because I wanted to do it slowly. I didn't want to wreck my knees. I have very bad knees, and I knew if I walked too fast, I would wreck my knees. Yeah, see, Amanda says, tattoos are the way police identify criminals. Yes, and it's also the way criminals can identify each other, too. And I was afraid of nasty people looking for me. So I wasn't afraid of the police as much as I was afraid of the criminals, actually, to be really honest with you. So, all right, thank you for pointing that out, Amanda. Anyways, so I wanted to remind myself to go slowly. And so the turtle was my totem, basically, my spirit animal on the whole Camino, was to make sure that I took my time, stopped and had coffee, met people, saw the churches, stopped and prayed, really, and I wanted to take in the whole experience, and not just because I'm a very goal-driven person and I just want to march to the end. I'm going to walk 25 kilometers today. I'm going to march until I get that done, and I won't even stop and have anything to eat because I got 25 kilometers to do today. That's not what I wanted to do, and that's not how I want to live my life, because the journey is far more important than the destination, but I have a natural inclination to want to get to the destination, right? So the turtle was to remind me of that whole process. And so when I finished the Camino, I got to Santiago, and I shared this story on my personal Facebook the other day. there was an artist there, and he had all this artwork out, and I was looking at a piece and I thought it was really cute, and he goes, oh, I want to show you the one that I did this morning. He goes, I was inspired to do this morning. And he pulls it out, and it's this turtle with daisies on it. Daisies on its back, walking to Santiago. And daisies are if you've ever read my book, daisies are my favorite flower in the whole world. I absolutely love daisies. And so it was this turtle walking to the Santiago Cathedral, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And he said, how much? And I asked him how much, and he said, normally 30, but for you, 25 euros. And I said, here you go. And I gave him 40 euros because I'm like, God, had you paint that for me this morning? And so I knew that I wanted the turtle and the daisies, and I wanted the expression Ultrea on the tattoo. And the reason is Ultrea means keep going. It's an expression. I have a ring here on my finger. My middle finger here has got a ring that says Ultrea on it. And I got this while I was on the Camino. I wanted that as part of the tattoo. So I'll show you what I did. This is on my arm as of Saturday. That's my tattoo that I got. There's the turtle, the shell on the back like this, it looks like a sun almost. That's a scallop shell, and that's from the marker on the Camino. There's markers that look just like that, and the arrow is part of the markers as well. And there's the daisies around with the word Ultrea. So I had to walk through a number of fears for me to be able to do that. It's right here on my forearm. It's still covered up in plastic. I was told to do that. It's a second skin, so my skin can breathe under there and whatever. So fear of pain, because I don't like to inflict pain on myself unless I have to. There's the fear of the needles was the second one. The fear of the permanency of having myself permanently marked. And then on top of that, the tattoo artist I chose had a tarantula right in her office. Now, I used to have I still do kind of I'm not comfortable with spiders. I had a really bad experience with a huge one when I was a kid. Massive. We think it was a trapdoor spider. It looked like a tarantula to me when I was a kid. It was not a wolf spider. It was bigger, way bigger than that. Anyways, so I've had this. So I said to her before I went in for the tattoo, I said, you know what? I said, can we bring your tarantula out and let it actually walk on me when I'm there? And she said, yeah. She said, yeah, I'm totally happy to do that. So I went to do the tattoo, and that was the first thing we went to do was the spider. Unfortunately, the spider is just about to molt, and they get like PMS when they're molting. They get unhappy, and she did not want to be picked up, and she did not want to go on anyone. So we didn't do that. So as it turned out, the spider was afraid of me. But I was willing to have the spider put on me. So I was willing to walk through that, and she was right there beside me while I was having it done. And through the whole tattoo, getting it done, I'm going to be honest with you, this was a sensitive spot, and I felt this. She put on a numbing stuff. I felt it. And I'm laying there, and I've got my fist clenched, and I'm kind of banging on the bed a little bit while I'm laying there, and I'm just like this. You can tell, and I'm forcing myself to breathe. So like I'd stop and I'd just focus on my breath and work through it. It hurt, and it hurt for about 2 hours while she did it. It felt like almost like someone was slicing me with a knife is how it felt. But the reality is I've been through way worse pain than that. The Camino was way worse pain, and the Camino lasted for 34 days. And this lasted for 2 hours. So my fear of the pain, albeit real, I didn't go into the fear. I stopped. Like the week leading up to the tattoo, I wasn't afraid. I didn't stay in that energy. It was like, oh, it's going to be what it is. You know, when I get there, I'll find out. And that was the energy I stayed in, was it'll be what it is. You know, I had a concern that I wouldn't like it after it's on, and then I'm permanently stuck with that tattoo. And it, you know, as it turns out, I absolutely adore it. The worst case scenario, I guess, would be that I'd have to get it removed. I'd have to get some laser stuff done and have it removed. That's the worst case scenario. That isn't going to happen because I absolutely adore it. So like that in itself, that experience this week, and I'm ridiculously happy with this. I had to walk through 4 different fears to do this. Now, and we're not talking about huge life changing fears, but that's walking through my fears brought me happiness. You know, when my husband and I started dating, my now husband, he has the exact same first name as a significant ex of mine, one that's associated with some trauma. And So right away, he's got the same first name. The universe was going to make me walk through that phobia to be with the person that I love. On our third date, he wore a Leonard Skinner shirt, which happens to be the same. It was the same favorite band as my ex. And so I was looking right at it and I'm like, oh my God, is this going to be the same thing again? Like, is this the same? And then he rode a motorcycle. You know, we rode a motorcycle on the third date as well. And I had this phobia about motorcycles and anyone who rides motorcycles. And that phobia had been an existing fear. It never went away. But I got on the back of the motorcycle and I worked through that. I had a fear of being in a relationship again. I had a fear of living in a house. I was so terrified of being in a house with someone again, but I pushed myself through it. Even though I was terrified, I did it. I pushed through it. And you know what? I'm really, really happy. The universe put my greatest happiness on the other side of all of my worst fears. In your life, the universe has done the same thing. Those things that are your fears, I don't care whether it's your fear of success, your fear of failure, your fear of your own self-confidence, your fear of public speaking, your fear of, like, we can name a million different things that you're afraid of, but I guarantee you that there is some happiness on the other side if you just work through it. The worst case, so me doing this talk tonight, this was me having to walk through some fears of my own. What if, and I had to name it for myself. Like, what if people don't like it? What if this totally flops and it's a bad idea? What if no one learns anything? What if no one whatever? The reality is, the worst case scenario of that is, okay, next we move on to something else. Like that's the worst case scenario. My mind will jump to my business becoming unsuccessful because people saw it and think I suck and blah, blah, blah. That's where my mind and my fears will jump to, but that's not a rational fear. I've got X amount of people watching this live right now. There's a certain amount of people. It looks like I've got about 20 to 30 people on the live right now. So 20 to 30 people out of 7,400 people on my Facebook page saw this. I don't have to keep it forever. It doesn't have to be around forever. I can get rid of it. So the worst case scenario is that it's unsuccessful. The worst case scenario was that I came on tonight and started stuttering and didn't know what to say and just froze and kind of stared at the screen tonight. Like that's the worst case scenario. It's worth walking through it because the best case scenario was that something that I feel that I should have been doing for a long time actually is finally getting done. I recognize that I'm walking through there's a block, and I did not realize what the block was until very recently. And it was that constant reminder from my mom and every teacher I ever had in public school, Tracey, you talk too much. Tracey, you talk too much. So it was a put down of who I am, because who I am is someone who likes to talk. I've learned how to listen now in my life. Maybe I didn't when I was a kid. I have learned how to listen, but I do still like to talk. But there's this part of myself that judges the one who wants to talk, because I was told for so many years that I talk too much. And I was told that by just about every adult in my life. And that was a core part of who I was someone who likes to talk. And then there are people who like to be quiet, and they hear constantly, oh, she's too quiet. She never says enough. You should speak more. I had to get comfortable with who I am. I had to get real and authentic, and the authentic Tracey is someone who likes to talk. And so I had to walk through that fear and walk through that block. That was really a block. It wasn't even so much of a fear as it was this mental block that I didn't even realize there. It was on a very subconscious, deep level that was judging myself because maybe all those other people are right and maybe I talk too much. Pamela says, you're going to get the people who need and want your words. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And that's the way I feel about this. Like when I go do these talks, so I go do talks every month with House of Sophrosine, and I go to the House of Hope and talk to ladies there. And maybe not everything that I have to say has significance for somebody, but pretty much every time that I do a talk of some sort, there are people who come away with inspiration, with something that they needed to hear. People will tell me, oh my God, I just needed to hear it said that way. And so that's my purpose with this, is I want to help empower women. And ultimately, walking through my fears is worth doing that because I'm one of these people who likes there to be a method to the madness. So what's the point of me having gone through all the crap I went through in my life if I'm not going to share it with other people who are going through some crap too, or who could use some tools to help themselves? I don't know who my audience is. I don't know who on the other end needs to hear this about what's being said tonight about fear and how to walk through it. But I guarantee that someone's going to watch this video and it's going to help them with learning how to logically sit down with their fear. And if you had to get a journal out and do it, get a journal out and do it. Name the fear. What is the worst case scenario? And not the worst case scenario 10 hops from now. What's the next step? The next step, worst case scenario, is never catastrophe, but we love to catastrophize. So, yeah. So that's like working. This right here is me walking through one of my fears. I don't know if any of you have had experiences where you remember walking through some of your fears and what the experience was on the other side of that. For me, walking through my fears, usually what I say on the other side of it is, wow, I wish I'd done that sooner. That's pretty much what happens every time. I remember when I left my old life behind, I was so terrified at the time that I did it, and I was terrified for a long time. It took me a long time to get the courage to just walk out the door. And after I did, really, once I got through the worst part of it, it's like, wow, I wish I'd done that sooner. And that's pretty much the case for almost every difficult thing where I had to walk through my fears. It's always, I wish I'd done that sooner. I have found so much joy in facing I love riding my motorcycle, and there was some fears involved with that, but God, I love it. I love scuba diving, and there were some fears involved with that. I absolutely love it. I love being married again. And there was massive fears of falling in love again, massive fears of getting hurt, massive fears of trusting someone, of making myself vulnerable. I did that with the book, made myself incredibly vulnerable. You have no idea how much fear was involved with putting that much of myself out into a book for other people to read, being extremely personal about what my weak spots were and what my strengths were and all of that stuff. Massive fear of being rejected, massive fear of people judging me, whatever. But the reality of that experience has been very, very good. I've had so much positive feedback from people, and it's not even funny the amount of private emails and messages and stuff and conversations in person that I've had with people who've told me how that affected them and how it's helped them. So, yeah, again, once I got to the other side of that fear, it's like, wow, I wish I'd been able to do that sooner. I know that it happened exactly when it was supposed to, though. Yeah. So, I kind of, yeah, I'm just taking a look here at the comments and stuff. Yeah, I think that's, the one thing I didn't touch on as much as I'd like to, I think, is the spiritual beliefs and stuff. I told you that I rely on my spiritual beliefs to help me through my fears. I'm guessing that a lot of the people who come onto my page and stuff have spiritual beliefs of some sort. When we have spiritual beliefs, if you really believe what you say you believe, then it should help you through pretty much almost all of your fears, whether it's death, whether it's being hurt, whether it's being left, whether it's being alone, whatever. All of that can be handed up and handed out. What I myself always move into the trust aspect. I honestly do trust that the universe is conspiring for my happiness. Well, if I say that and I believe that even when things go wrong, the first thing out of my mouth is, I trust that this is happening for me, not to me. And some of the worst and scariest experiences all ended up being things that helped me, not hurt me. So when they were happening and unfolding, I'm like, oh my God, like what is happening here? And then it's like, no, I trust the universe is doing this for me. And it's always been the case that things end up better on the other side of it. It's like a blessing in disguise that I don't recognize. And I trust that that's going to happen. I really do. When I'm paying attention and listening to the universe, if I'm beating my head against the wall and continuing with a pattern that's not healthy for me, it may be difficult, but the universe is not doing that to me. I'm doing that to me. There's a difference. I'm doing that to me. But when something random happens in my life, my experience has been is the universe is doing it to help me in some way. I've always come out a stronger, better person, a wiser person, a more loving person in some way on the other side of it. So So sit down and ask yourself what you believe in, and then apply those beliefs when you're feeling fearful in your life, you know? So you can apply logic of what is the actual worst case scenario, because the worst case scenario is never as bad as we think it is. You know, the worst case scenario, when I was so concerned about my business and whether it would fail or succeed, the worst case scenario was that I was right back at the same job that I already had and I already didn't like. So the worst case scenario was that really nothing changed. And the best case scenario was that everything changed. You know, and so learning how to do that and to get calm enough, and that's the trick, is getting calm enough. So prayer helps you to get calm. Meditation helps you to get calm. Breathing exercises help you to get calm. You center, look it in the face. Something that can really help me when I'm needing to get calm is putting my hands over my heart. I love the me who's feeling afraid right now. So I'm afraid. I'm afraid of whether people enjoyed this tonight or not. I'm afraid of whether or not my message came out well and whether it was just me babbling on or if there was anything of value in this. So you know what? I love the me who's really worried about all that. The reality is my life is going to be the same either way. It doesn't really matter. My life is not going to change a huge deal. Well, it could. It could change in a positive way, but on the negative side, all is still the same. I'm still the same person and nothing's changed. But I love the me who gets worried about that. I love the me who is self-conscious. I love the me who worries what other people think. This is what it comes down to. And this act right here of putting your hands over your heart and sending love and finding compassion for yourself instead of judgment will help you bring you to that place of stillness and quiet, where you can then bring your logic in and you can also bring your spiritual beliefs in. And that's when you can hand it over to the universe and say, you've got this, universe. I trust that somehow we'll get through this. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. You guys haven't asked any questions or given any situations of your own. You know, I've been reading the comments on here. No one has said, oh, I'm dealing with this or dealing with that. You know, I'm open in these talks, just so you know, when I'm doing these, to either making comment with people or answering questions or whatever. So if anyone has them, now's the time to put them out. Otherwise, I will bid you adieu in just a few moments. I'm grateful for all of you who came on tonight, and I'm grateful for those who commented and said hello. It's nice to see everyone. Hello to you. Hello to you. Hello to you and to you. Hello to Ashley. Your tattoo is really nice and it suits you, Tracy. Thank you. I think it really suits me too. I've been big time into turtles for a very, very long time. It's one of my spirit animals. They remind me that Rome isn't built in a day. You know, the turtle in First Nations legends, North America is known as Turtle Island, and it's because when there was nothing but water and ocean, there was the turtle. And the animals went to the bottom of the ocean and they brought dirt up and they attached the dirt to the outside of the turtle's back and they built around and around and around until it was the continent of North America. And that's how North America was formed. And that's why it's called Turtle Island, is because the turtle, it's actually built on the turtle's back. That idea of building a new world, building a new life for ourselves, that is a big important part of the message with Turtle. Myself, I needed to rebuild my life when I was starting from scratch and with nothing 12 years ago. And so that aspect, but also that new world isn't built overnight. It takes time. And the turtle reminds me to always patience and time. And they're also very good luck. So yeah, I absolutely adore the tattoo that I got. And I'm so glad that I walked through my fears to get it. Thanks for saying so, Ashley. Kathy says, I love the me who is blank. Right now is my best takeaway. Yeah, this is a takeaway for everyone. Honestly, you know, Matt Kahn teaches this, I love the me who. Matt Kahn teaches it. He's the first person I heard it from. He's got YouTube videos and books and stuff. And last name spelled Kahn. Anyways, I first saw him online in 2015. And when I learned this, my self-esteem game was already here by then. I was doing pretty good, but it took it to way up here at that time when I love the me who, because it teaches unconditionalness. No matter what I'm thinking, I love the one who's thinking it. No matter what I'm doing, I love the one who's doing it. No matter what I'm feeling, I love the one who's feeling it. It's not that I love what I feel. I love the one who's feeling it. It's not that I necessarily love what I'm doing, but I love the one who's doing it. It's not necessarily that I love the mistake that I made, but I love the one who's making it. So that is what unconditional love is about loving someone no matter what they're doing, loving. Well, I'm teaching that to myself, unconditional love with myself. So it doesn't mean that I don't try to change or improve or not do that mistake anymore, but it does mean that I'm going to have compassion and love the one who made the mistake, even if it's not the first time I made that mistake. Like, I will love the one who made that mistake. And this brings me to a spot where I'm willing to look at the mistake with compassion instead of judgment. There's much less chance of it happening again, actually, by me approaching it with compassion. You're welcome, Melissa. Thanks for coming on today. All right, and Amanda says, I have to go pick up Tommy at work. Talk soon. All right, so that's all of us. We'll all check out right now. It was great to have everyone on here tonight. Thank you so much for joining on the show. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll be making a YouTube video out of this, and I'll also be creating my first podcast. It may take me a little while to figure out how to do that. I hope that everyone has a wonderful evening and a wonderful week. I am going to give you all a big hug. So right now, if you can put your phone down or your computer or whatever, put your arms around yourself. Give yourself a big hug like this, and I want you to tell you that you love yourself. Say, I love me to yourself, and send some love to your heart. If you're struggling right now, I want you to love the one who's struggling. You don't have to love the struggle, but love the one who's surviving it. And feel this hug from me, because I'm giving you a big hug right now too. I hope that everyone has a wonderful evening and a wonderful week. I will talk to you folks again soon.